Good morning guys, I am going to report the ventral surface external aspect of the heart. It contains the interventricular sulcus, auricles, coronary sulcus, aorta, pulmonary artery, superior and inferior vena cava, apex and base. Let's start with interventricular sulcus. So the interventricular sulcus is a superficial groove or depression between the ventricles. It is important because this is where some of the large coronary arteries and veins run. Next is auricles. The cavity is divided down the middle into a right and left heart, which in turn are subdivided into two chambers. The left auricle collects oxygenated blood as it leaves the lungs and moves blood into the left ventricle, while the right auricles collects the oxygenated blood from the bloodstream. Next is coronary sulcus, also known as the atrioventricular groove, is a groove that separates the atria and ventricular of the heart. Next is aorta, the main artery that carries blood away from your heart to the rest of your body. Pulmonary arteries are blood vessels that carry oxygen-poor blood from the right side of your heart to your lungs. Superior and inferior vena cava collects the oxygenated blood from your whole body and bring it back to your heart for new oxygen. This is why the vena cava veins are the largest veins in your body. And last, apex and base. The base is at the top where the great vessels enter the heart, and it is formed by both atria. And the apex of the heart is a very tip and helps pump or wring out blood from the ventricles to the rest of the body.
Let's finally start with the actual anatomy. So if we turn this picture to the side, you'll be able to see a pointy end called apex of the heart, which is directed forward and downwards to the left. And if we turn the heart around and look at the back side, we can see the heart's base, or basis cordis, directed backward and a little to the right. The apex of the heart is the very tip and helps pump or writing out the blood from the ventricles to the rest of the body. It helps regulate from the right and left ventricles of the heart and allowing them to pump blood upward and out of the heart. The base of the heart is located at the level of the third costal cartilage. It is directed upward, backward, and to the right. It is separated from the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th thoracic vertebrae by the esophagus, aorta, and thoracic duct. It is formed mainly by the left atrium and to the small extent by the back part of the right atrium. The vena cava has two parts, the superior and inferior vena cava. The superior vena cava carries blood from the head, neck, arms, and chest. The inferior vena cava carries blood from the legs, feet, and organs in the abdomen and pelvis. The vena cava is the largest vein in the body. The aorta is the main artery that carries blood away from your heart to the rest of your body. The blood leaves the heart through the aortic valve. Then it travels through the aorta, making a cane-shaped curve that allows one major arteries to deliver oxygen, rich blood to the brain, muscle, and other cells. There are two auricles in the heart. One auricle is attached to each of the anterior surfaces of the outer walls of the atria. That is the left atrium and the right atrium. Visually, they look like wrinkled pouch-like structures. Their purpose is to increase the capacity of the atrium and to increase the volume of blood that is able to contain. The pulmonary arteries carry oxygen, pour blood from your heart to your lungs. This is a vital function your blood needs to reach your lungs to gain oxygen and get rid waste products like carbon dioxide. This blood then returns to your heart and pumps it out to the rest of your body.
Right and left atria. The atria of the heart receive blood from veins. The atria function primarily as reservoirs where blood returning from veins collects before it enters the ventricles. Contraction of the atria forces blood into the ventricles to complete ventricular filling. The right atrium receives blood through three major openings. The superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava drain blood from most of the body, and the smaller coronary sinus drains blood from most of the heart muscle. The left atrium receives blood through the four pulmonary veins, which drain blood from the lungs. The two atria are separated from each other by a partition called interatrial septum. Right and left ventricles. The ventricles of the heart are its major pumping chambers. They eject blood into the arteries and force it to flow through the circulatory system. The atria open into the ventricles, and each ventricle has one large outflow throat located superiorly near the midline of the heart. The right ventricle pumps blood into the pulmonary trunk, and the left ventricle pumps blood into the aorta. The two ventricles are separated from each other by the muscular intraventricular septum. The wall of the left ventricle is thicker than the wall of the right ventricle, and the wall of the right ventricle contracts more forcefully and generates a greater blood pressure than the wall of the right ventricle. However, the left and right ventricles pump nearly the same volume of blood. The higher pressure generated by the left ventricle moves blood through the larger systemic circulation, whereas the lower pressure generated by the right ventricle moves blood through the smaller pulmonary circulation. The interventricular septum, also known as the ventricular septum, refers to the triangular wall of cardiac tissue that separates the left and right ventricles of the heart. It is also separates the left and right ventricles. It is upper, thin, membranous part, lower, thick, muscular part, and carries the triventricular bundles of His. The portion of the interventricular septum located near the base of upper portion of the heart, containing vessels, consists mainly of membranous tissue and is where most defects of the septum can occur. It is located between the right and left ventricles of the heart. Pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins are blood vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood from your lungs to your heart. Your pulmonary veins are part of your body's pulmonary circuit. This is a system of blood vessels that moves blood between your heart and your lungs.
Veins are blood vessels containing blood flowing to the heart, while arteries have blood flowing from the heart. The blue is represents of blood vessels containing the oxygenated blood, while the red blood vessels have oxygenated blood fresh from the lungs. Now let's follow the path of the blood through the heart. The superior vena cava receives blood from the head, neck, upper limbs, and chest. Meanwhile, the inferior vena cava receives blood from the trunk, viscera, and lower limbs. Both the superior and inferior vena cava end up in the right atrium, one of the four chambers of the heart. The heart not only has four chambers, it also has four valves. The purpose of the valve is to keep the blood moving in the right direction and not flow backwards. Blood exits the right atrium through the tricuspid valve, so called. It has three flaps and enters the right ventricle. The blood exits the right ventricle through the pulmonary valve and enters the pulmonary artery. Again, it is an artery because blood is flowing away from the heart, but it is blue because it lacks oxygen. The pulmonary artery then spills into the left and right pulmonary arteries, which go to each respective lung. In the lungs, gas exchange occurs. The blood discards carbon dioxide and picks up oxygen. Now the blood comes back from the lungs through the pulmonary veins entering the left atrium. Next, the blood is pumped into the left ventricle through the mitral valve or bicuspid valve. Finally, the oxygenated blood leaves the ventricle through the aortic semilunar valve entering the aortic arc. The aorta, which is the largest of the arteries, distributes the oxygenated blood to the rest of the body.